All right, infrastructure admins, welcome. I'm your host, and today we're tackling a masterclass explainer focused squarely on NCP-MCI 7.5, specifically Section 5.2, Cluster Lockdown and SSH. If you're currently gearing up for your Nutanix Certified Professional Multi-Cloud Infrastructure exam and you need to nail down the baseline for AOS 7.5, AHV 11.0, and Prism Central 7.5, well, you're in the exact right place. We're going to comprehensively cover everything you need to know about this specific subtopic so you can walk into test day with absolute confidence. Let's get to it.
Here is our game plan for today. We'll start with Section 1, the Why Foundation. Then Section 2, walk through Cluster Creation CLI. After that, Section 3, walk through Prism Security GUI. Next is Section 4, exam traps and edge cases. And finally, Section 5, key facts to memorize.
Okay, Section 1, the Why Foundation, establishing our security baseline. So, we must first establish exactly why Cluster Lockdown is such a critical operational concept for securing a Nutanix environment. Before we even touch a command line or a graphical interface, understanding the core philosophy behind this feature is what's going to help you logically reason through those tricky, scenario-based questions on the exam. But first, let's just make sure we're all speaking the exact same language. You know the drill. The CVM is your controller virtual machine, literally the heart of Nutanix storage. AHV is the Acropolis hypervisor. AOS is the Acropolis operating system running on that CVM. PE is Prism Element for managing a single cluster, and PC is Prism Central, used for your multi-cluster management. When we talk about Cluster Lockdown today, we're primarily talking about securing access to the CVMs and AHV hosts managed by PE and PC. Knowing these distinctions intimately, that's going to prevent you from getting tripped up by those sneaky distractor answers on the exam.
This brilliantly illustrates our core objective for this whole topic: migrating away from inherently vulnerable password-based SSH and strictly enforcing authorized key-based access. Think about the actual threat landscape out there right now. You've got automated botnets and malicious scripts constantly scanning internet-facing or, frankly, even internally compromised network segments. They're hunting for open SSH ports, port 22, and relentlessly bombarding them with standard default credentials like Nutanix or admin. Relying on those standard passwords leaves your infrastructure wide open to brute force dictionary attacks. Nutanix Cluster Lockdown is designed to completely sever that attack vector. By moving to key-based SSH, you're replacing a easily guessable string of characters with highly complex, mathematically linked cryptographic keys that are, for all practical purposes, impossible to brute force.
The absolute crucial takeaway here is that Cluster Lockdown is your primary mechanism for restricting administrative access. It ensures only verified keys can ever touch your infrastructure. It eliminates default passwords right at deployment or later on through Prism. It disables password-based SSH login across both Prism Element and Prism Central. And, critically, it operates directly on your controller VMs and your AHV hosts to vastly improve your overall security posture. This distinction that it operates on CVMs and AHV hosts is a detail you'll absolutely want to pin in your memory for a specific exam trap we'll talk about later. Ultimately, this is the why. You are slamming the door shut on brute force password attacks and establishing a zero-trust administrative boundary.
Moving right along to Section 2, walk through Cluster Creation CLI, applying lockdown at deployment.
Applying lockdown right at deployment is highly recommended because it means your cluster is securely hardened from the very first second it exists. Now, when you sit down for the exam, keep a close eye out for this exact syntax. Running cluster-lockdown mode equals true during cluster creation gives you the highest possible level of day zero security. But you really need to understand what this specific command actually does. It disables both password-based authentication and public SSH key-based authentication if you haven't provided any external keys yet. Think about what that means in the real world. If you run this without injecting any keys, it is a full lock on the front door. You're effectively locking the keys inside the house before pulling the front door shut, meaning you will have zero interactive SSH access.
So how do we handle that better? What's really interesting here is seeing the syntax required to enforce password lockdown mode right at the inception of the cluster without locking yourself out entirely. Notice the specific flag used here. --password_lockdown mode equals true. When you use this alongside your standard cluster creation commands, you're deliberately telling AOS to restrict password-based SSH access to just the Nutanix and admin accounts right out of the gate. This secures the environment while keeping the mechanism open just enough for you to inject a public key. Alternatively, you can securely inject multiple trusted public keys immediately during that very same creation phase. Using the -external access keys parameter allows you to pass a comma-separated list of your public keys, like public key 1, public key 2, and so on. This is fantastic because it completely bypasses the need for default passwords at any point in the cluster's lifecycle. Your cluster spins up, it immediately rejects standard passwords, and from second one, it only listens to the specific cryptographic keys you just gave it. Pretty slick, right?
All right, Section 3, Walkthrough, Prism Security GUI. Configuring lockdown post-deployment.
Obviously, not every cluster is locked down at birth, so you absolutely must know how to secure a running environment via the GUI for the NCP-MCI exam. This is the exact step-by-step click path you need to memorize to operationalize key-based SSH access within the Prism interface. It's elegantly simple, but it requires precision. First, hit the gear icon for settings. Navigate to Security and select Cluster Lockdown. But pay incredibly close attention to step 3 here. You must deselect Enable Remote Login with Password. If you simply paste your new user SSH key in step 4, but you forget to uncheck that box in step 3, well, you haven't actually locked the cluster down at all. You've just added a second way to get in, leaving the front door wide open to the exact default password attacks we are trying to prevent. The lockdown only occurs when that box is unchecked.
You'll find these settings deeply integrated into the AOS Security Management sections. On the exam, if they happen to ask where to physically navigate within Prism Element to find this toggle, you're looking for the gear icon first, then the left-hand navigation bar under Security. The interface is purposefully designed to make this critical security hardening step accessible, but as an admin, you've got to know exactly where it lives in the hierarchy.
And please remember, before configuring this in the Prism dashboard, you have to generate your public keys externally. Nutanix does not generate the cryptographic keys for you within this specific settings menu. You'll need to use a terminal command like ssh-keygen on a Mac or Linux machine, or a tool like puttygen if you're on Windows. Once you have generated that text block representing your public key, that is exactly what you copy and paste into the Prism interface to finalize the whole lockdown process.
Next up, Section 4, Exam Traps and Edge Cases, what the examiners absolutely love to test.
Go ahead and put your examiner hat on for a minute, because we're going to dissect the specific edge cases designed to test your deep understanding. Knowing how to turn a feature on, that's only half the battle. Knowing how it breaks is what separates a certified professional from a novice. So consider this classic exam scenario. What happens to your cluster if an administrator is, say, cleaning up old profiles and accidentally removes all SSH keys while password login is already disabled?
You will absolutely be tested on these specific exceptions. Let's break them down. First, the total lockout we just mentioned. If you delete all keys while remote login with a password is disabled, you trigger a total lockout of SSH access. It's exactly as unforgiving as it sounds. You can't simply log back in to fix it. Second, there's a major conceptual trap, account mapping. When you add a single user SSH key in Prism, it maps that access to both the Nutanix and admin accounts automatically. If a scenario question asks how to restrict a specific key to only the admin account using the Prism Cluster Lockdown feature, you know it's a trick question. It applies to both universally. Finally, the ESXi exception. This one is a massive red herring on the exam. Nutanix Cluster Lockdown operates on the CVMs and the AHV hosts. It does not disallow SSH access to ESXi hosts. If your cluster is running VMware ESXi, you must manage its SSH security completely separately through vCenter. Do not let the phrase Cluster Lockdown trick you into thinking it applies to the ESXi hypervisor layer.
Furthermore, be very aware of the lock status parameter in the command line. Enabling enable lock status equals true via NCLI freezes your security config completely. It prevents any further changes to NCLI or API calls. Activating lock status is a one-way street for an administrator. Once it's on, you cannot turn it off yourself. You literally have to contact Nutanix support to intervene and unlock the configuration on the back end for you.
Almost there. Section 5, Key Facts to Memorize. Your ultimate certification cheat sheet.
We're in the final stretch, so let's lock in the absolute must-memorize facts that you'll need to recall on test day. These are the specific technical details that you either know or you don't. Nutanix explicitly supports only these 3 encryption algorithms for key-based SSH: AES 128-CTR, AES 192-CTR, and AES 256-CTR. Notice they are all counter mode or CTR algorithms. As for the key types themselves, the system strictly accepts RSA and ECDSA. If an exam question tries to trick you by throwing in DSA or ED2519, you know they are definitively incorrect based on the baseline 7.5 documentation.
And this brilliantly illustrates the permanence of this security posture. Once locked down, those underlying default passwords are not just disabled, actually, they're functionally gone. Prism does not store the CVM or host passwords anymore, which means you cannot simply click a Change Password button in a panic to magically regain access if you lose your private keys. The system is securely locked, functioning exactly as a strict zero-trust administrative boundary should.
So, now that you deeply understand the operational mechanics, the specific command line and GUI walkthroughs, that really critical ESXi edge case, and exactly why default passwords are the enemy, you're perfectly positioned to master this topic on the exam. Review those encryption algorithms, remember the total lockout trap, and you will do great. So, infrastructure admins, with SSH locked down tight, what aspect of infrastructure security are you going to dive into next? Keep studying, keep building, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.